Over to you now.
Good evening. I'm so excited to welcome you to the fourth Interfaith Leadership Forum entitled Interfaith Engagement with the Environmental Crisis. This forum focuses on the moral, spiritual, and religious urgency with regard to the wider environmental crisis. This evening, we will explore the overlap between faith and ecology with pioneers who are strongly grounded in their particular faith traditions and who take the lead in making faith a driving force in addressing urgent environmental challenges. This event is also an opportunity to help DC area stakeholders reconnect with like-minded individuals and institutions. It is a renewed affirmation of the foundational link between faith and environment, and it is an overview of practical arenas where faith communities continue to make significant contributions in upholding our shared responsibility of caring for the environment. You see, we hear about the environmental crisis in the public square all of the time. We hear about the fast fashion mountain of leftover clothes in the Chilean desert that's visible from space. We hear about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is comprised of extremely large masses of marine litter. We hear about climate change caused by the human consumption of fossil fuels and even the environmental damage caused by its most viable solution, lithium-ion batteries for our cars. We hear about the pervasive structural racism in environmental epidemiology caused by various industrial pollutants, which lead to diminished health outcomes in predominantly Black and Brown communities around the world. And these are just a few examples. The problem seems so big, but we still ask ourselves, what can we do to help? We ask ourselves, what does my faith instruct me to do? And further, how can I act with others of my faith who have the same concerns? And we ask ourselves, knowing that there is power in numbers, how does my faith intersect with those of different faiths who have the same concern? And this is where the Interfaith Leadership Forum steps in. The Interfaith Leadership Forum is a regional learning platform that makes the existing expertise, capacity, and scholarship on interfaith engagement available for the use of clergy, educators, public servants, and others. The Interfaith Leadership Forum is open to everyone who is interested in advancing their interfaith literacy and serving the community as interfaith mobilizers. Our objective is to strengthen interfaith relationships, literacy, and leadership by equipping one another with various models of dialogue with distinct ends, experiencing deeper levels of interfaith encounter and dialogue, strengthening literacy about other faiths and about our own, overcoming prejudices and misconceptions about other faiths, and to elicit social action through interfaith engagement. And as this evening demonstrates, the Interfaith Leadership Forum provides a timely and important venue where diverse groups of community leaders, scholars, and clergies and public officials can engage in in-depth discussions on shared values and explore ways to harness them for social action. Tonight, of course, that discussion centers around the environmental crisis. We would like to thank our sponsors who made this event possible: the Interfaith Council of Metropolitan Washington, the Rumi Forum, and the Washington Theological Consortium. This evening, we will have a keynote address, a response by panelists, and breakout sessions. And we will reconvene as a full group after those breakout sessions to review the goals and to outline strategies for action. A detailed program is included in the participant guide that you received by email. And you can also find the biographies of the panelists and breakout session hosts in that participant guide. At this time, I would like to introduce our keynote speakers, Rabbi Fred Scherlinder Dobb, and Joel Novi. Fred Scherlinder Dobb is the senior rabbi at Shalom Adat, a graduate of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. Rabbi Scherlinder Dobb currently serves as the chair of the National Coalition on the Environment and Jewish Life. He serves on the boards of the National Religious Partnership in the Environment and the board of Interfaith Power and Light, specifically their Regeneration Project. Joining Rabbi Scherlinder Dobb is the keynote address is Joel Novi. Ms. Novi is the District Maryland and Virginia Director of she is the District Maryland and Virginia Director of Interfaith Power and Light. She serves on the advisory board of Dayanu, a Jewish call to climate action, and she is co-author of the book Green and Just Celebrations. Please welcome our keynote speakers, Rabbi Fred Scherlinder Dobb and Joel Novi.
Thank you so much, Beverly and all. And the first and foremost thank you really goes to everyone who is joining tonight, both live and hopefully watching the recording after, that this should have legs. Thank you all for being here and for making this a priority. And a huge appreciation to Ibrahim and the Interfaith Conference of Metropolitan Washington, amazing, venerable group, for assembling this great panel and this wonderful opportunity. So I wanted to make the most of everyone's time and not just tell you a bunch of things that you probably already know. So let me state these as givens. To me, they're given. And I'm not going to be able to watch while I'm reading and making sure the camera's working. But I hope to make it participatory that you nod your head as vigorously as you agree with each of these statements. Ready? My religion, like most others, broadly bids us to do right by each other and to do right by the other species with whom we share this earth. Okay, I'm seeing some nods. Yeah, we're off to a good start. My religion, like most others, specifically offers wisdom, guidance, and nuance in how to do right by each other in the ecosystem. And my religion, like all others, is far from monolithic. I can speak generally about my tradition, but ultimately we each speak for ourselves. Cool. All right, that's on the religion side. Now, reflecting the settled science, here are some green givens. Again, nod as vigorously as appropriate. Climate change is real, it's bad, and mostly we are causing it. Climate change already impacts everyone and will do so increasingly, and affects some, particularly poorer and minority, BIPOC, and global South populations who are more vulnerable even than the rest of us. And climate is far from the only eco-concern, because biodiversity and equity, water quality and quantity, toxins, safe food supply, and much more all loom large as spiritual as well as scientific concerns. And finally, no climate and environment messaging would be appropriate without this one. And despite all those challenges, there is still hope. With sustained effort and some, but not too much, shared sacrifice, we can yet right this ship. All right, maybe not as many nods on that one, but there's the difference between hope and optimism, right? You don't have to believe that things are going to get better. You have to believe there's a sliver of a chance and let that spiritual sense of hope carry us exactly there. So if your neck is a bit sore from nodding vigorously throughout so far, good for you. The rest of this panel, with all the sharing from these many wise folks, will just be icing on the cake, nuance to your knowledge, maybe some useful framings and turns of phrase or quotes and stats, to help you be on future panels just like this, to be ever more effective as religious environmental activists. If you didn't nod vigorously on the science side, please read the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, consult reputable experts. The consensus is quite clear. Now, if you didn't nod vigorously on the religion side, then an invitation to please listen with open mind and kind heart and sensitive soul to the Deen, the Dharma, the Torah, the gospel, the wisdom that is being shared in this next hour. Turning to a few slides along with the notes, which I am doing now. Sorry, here we go. Right. Hope you can see this while I keep the rest up. So sorry that it's not quite full screen. Every tradition has a unique contribution to make. That is a really important starting point. As climate activists like to say, to change everything, we need everyone. And just as all God's critters got a place in the choir and need to be protected, so too do all God's children's traditions got a place at the eco table, a role to play in the great turning in our time. I call this pluralism plus the idea of sector truths. We all see what we see, but someone opposite us is seeing not just us, but those around and behind us. We need each other for a fuller picture. Or as the late Reverend Kirster Stendahl framed it, holy envy, that I'm not going to convert to your tradition, but I want to learn it well enough to be able to say, dang, I wish I had me some of that, right? And then in turn, bring in an authentic way from this dialogue, enrich our own traditions. This is part of what we are here to do. So every tradition has a unique contribution to make. Please listen carefully tonight for what you, as a climate-conscious Catholic, might learn from Islam, or as an eco-Episcopal, what to add from Sikh tradition. As a green Hindu, some Buddhist insights. That is our goal. Many traditions have what to offer. This is a quick summary of some of my favorites distilled primarily from Judaism, but I think you will see the parallels with all. There's the basic core teaching of unity. The big picture is interdependence. There's a humility in the face of the divine, framed beautifully by Psalm 24, the earth is God's, not ours. There's sustainability because every species has a right to be here. Creation exists for its own sake. There's centering the human piece. Perhaps this should be number one, not number four. The social and racial and environmental justice that we are called to do as part and parcel of our environmentalism. The intergenerational justice, we do this, as our tradition says, l'dor vador, from generation to generation. We need to take that long view. Conserve, remember that the same root of conservative, as in political, is conservation, and that is a very core notion. This should not be a political issue because ultimately it's about waste not, want not. And number 7, appropriately on this list for the Jewish, the idea of Shabbat, sabbatical, taking a breather, holding something more important than the realm of production and consumption so that holiness can truly pervade. And then I like to borrow from the Sierra Club's model or motto, explore, enjoy, and protect. Go out and appreciate the brilliance of what's around us, enjoy it, make the most of it, and from that place, a stance of protection. Specifically, love your neighbor. Much is common across all of our traditions, some version of the golden rule, this framed by our friends, literally, the Friends Committee at every rally. Hashtag love thy neighbor, no exceptions. That's a key contribution of religion writ large to the environmental conversation. Human and non-human neighbor alike, very importantly. And specifically, the call of environmental justice, Next one. Yes. The idea that if we truly love our neighbor, we have to center those and empower those who have for far too long been pushed to the margins by the dominant discourse and society, economy, and polity. This is the case domestically, as in Black Lives Matter, and this is the case internationally. I love this group of Global South people at a UN event. Climate change affects us most. We must never forget the disproportionate impacts on certain groups. And of course, each tradition has its own key insight. Again, listen for the other speakers as they share those. I would say from Judaism, the Sabbath idea of holding a realm more sacred than production and consumption is one. And another is simply regulation and law, a willingness to say it's not just enough to have voluntary targets of doing the right thing. We actually need systems of accountability. Those are just two quick examples. In the big picture, we are faced with some real urgency, and we need the best of religious tradition. We need the best of activist and organizing tradition. Whether it's the idea, as the sign by the Capitol says, there is no planet B, so we must protect our common home. That's, of course, Pope Francis's language, or Dr. King's language, the fierce urgency of now to do this work, because without this work, we will not build the beloved community. Famous Jewish philosopher Martin Buber said it incredibly well to wrap up the theological piece. Love of the Creator and love of that which God has created are finally one and the same. Every one of our traditions talks about loving the Creator, and every one of our traditions talks about loving creation, the creations, us. We need to take it seriously, and we need to bring the level of love of God to love of each other, neighbor, human, and non. So that's the macro picture. You may be thinking, what can my one little congregation, my lone self do? Well, actually, quite a lot. You can do great things, and don't worry about anything that you yourself can't do if you're part of a team, of a groundswell. Beautiful line from contemporaneous with the Gospels in our Mishnah 1900 years ago. Rabbi Tarfon said, it's not upon you to finish the job. You just have to do your part. You are not free to avoid it altogether. If we each do so, we will do great things. Quick examples drawn from my one little synagogue. Joel will have more, many more drawn from across the DMV. So ours is an EPA Energy Star award-winning congregation because we simply took things like passive solar and sustainable materials in mind when we designed. We can do that each of our communities at every stage with a retrofit from light bulbs to an entire redo. We can, of course, think about where we get our electricity from. Ours was the first Jewish community in the DMV to go solar, 43 kilowatts. At the time, it was the largest installation on any religious property in the entire DMV, which is ridiculous because we're not a big synagogue. I'm happy to say that Catholic University and others have since leapfrogged us. But this is us inspecting our panels a dozen years ago already. We can each do that. We planted an organic garden. This is my 14-year-old now, when he was 1, with a tomato as big as his head from our on-site Mishnah garden. But even if your community doesn't own a building or have grounds to tend or room to plant, you still can take members of your congregation to Annapolis or Richmond or the Wilson Building, to your county seat or town hall, together to demand justice and sustainability. You can develop partnerships in local communities by taking an eco-justice tour along the Anacostia and connecting in Ward 7 and 8, or wherever across the DMV or wherever you may be, in order to raise consciousness and build bridges. You can invite green speakers from your own faith tradition or from groups like Interfaith Power and Light to address your congregation. Your clergy person or you yourself, even as a layperson, can give green sermons and teachings. And of course, you can introduce your kids to it and make this a central tenet of religious education, and so much more. In all of this, the key is you are not alone. Within your faith tradition, there are others. It may fall on you to organize them. Turbans off, hats off to Rajwan, who is a national and international leader in the Sikh community on that. Maybe you play leadership role in one key arena where your influence spreads far and wide, as Sevim does in the Muslim world around environmental education. You'll hear from these folks and others later. Maybe you're just one in the number, a needed voice as part of a rousing chorus. It's all good. Know the resources of your tradition. Many of them are organized under one umbrella called National Religious Partnership for the Environment, Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, Evangelical, one of many places where these come together. And then each of those breaks down. Just in the Jewish world, we've got Dayenu, Adamah, Jewish Earth Alliance, Kojal, and so many more. We could do the same for every one of our faith traditions. But the key is really that across faith traditions, you're not alone. We do this together. And there are national interfaith groups like NRPE and Green Faith. There are hyper-local ones like Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions. And there's the regional model that is also national and also local that I and Joelle are deeply involved with, called Interfaith Power and Light. This at the 2019 climate rally is on the right, the national director, Reverend Susan Hendershot, and on the left, our next speaker, Joelle Novi, the amazing director of IPL DMV, because we are all in this together.
I want to thank Rabbi Scherlinder Dobb for his remarks, and I was struck by the notion that every religious tradition has a unique contribution to play in resolving the environmental crisis. And I appreciated the notion that shalom, or simply being, should be carried over into our daily lives, where we reduce our production and consumption. And of course, the imperative to love our neighbor, which is shown by working for justice. As was stated, we will hear from Joelle Novi a little later in our program. And at this time, we'll hear from our 4 respondents in the following order. We'll hear from Reverend Dr. Gilson Volkanig, Professor of Church and Society at United Lutheran Seminary, who is providing a Christian perspective. We'll hear from Sevim Kaliyangju, Executive Director of Green Muslims, who is providing an Islamic outlook. We'll hear from Rajwant Singh, President of EcoSeek, who is speaking from a Sikh perspective. And lastly, we'll hear from Christian Barker, co-founder and director of One Earth Sangha, who is providing a Buddhist outlook. Once again, the detailed biographies are found in the participant guide, and each respondent has approximately 8 minutes. Please welcome Reverend Dr. Volkanig.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm grateful and honored to be a part of this learning community this evening. And my understanding of the panel was that we were to briefly mention and briefly explore a teaching that inspires and guides us to respond to environmental crisis and to care for our common home, Earth. And I've been invited as a Christian voice. And I've decided to share a teaching that I actually hear from other Christians pretty often, from time to time, and especially when people are looking deeply into the environmental crisis that seems so daunting and intractable. But I have to confess that the teaching I'm going to share isn't an authoritative doctrine. It's not a scripture passage. It's not a part of a creed. It's not from some official confession. It's rather a humble aphorism, but Christians turn to it, and I myself find hope in it. And it does capture some of the spirit of Christian teaching. Now, in the broader scope of Christian teaching, there is a lot of Christian scholarship that adapts Christian scriptures and doctrines to ecology or environmental perspectives. There's been a movement towards making eco-theology more normative. Of course, we have Laudato Si from Pope Francis. We've had years of Patriarch Bartholomew leading the way with eco-theology. We have environmental commitments and witness from a range of Protestant denominations. On the other hand, it is no secret that many Christians are hostile to environmental concern. Some Christians claim that God intends to simply dispose of the earth, a view that has eerie similarity to a practice that we do every day when we take something and throw it away. We dispose of things thoughtlessly. In the face of environmental issues, there are some Christians who say the earth is only a temporary container which we aim to leave behind. Well, the teaching I'm going to cite comes from another troubled time, about a half millennium ago, about 500 years ago, a time when there was bubonic plague and other diseases. Hunger, squalor, violence, and oppression were all around. Life was short and worrisome. The subset of Christianity to which I belong and which I came up through traces its story to that troubled time 500 years ago and to a very troubled individual named Martin Luther, who lived in that very troubled time, the 16th century. Now, some scholars think that Luther thought the world was going to end right in his own time. And that's the background or context for this aphorism that I'm going to share. There's a little story that somebody asked Luther what he would do if he knew that the world was going to end tomorrow. And it's said that Luther said, "Even if I knew that tomorrow the world would go to pieces, I would still plant my apple tree. I would still plant my apple tree." I've heard Lutheran Christians and other people resort to this aphorism when the environmental crisis is staring us in the face and it's so daunting and it's so difficult. The little humble aphorism about an apple tree, humble as it is, seems to express hope that God would not abandon us, that grace is present no matter what, and that there is a future with God that has continuity with saving work that God has already expressed and accomplished. Well, it just so happens that there is no actual documentary evidence that Luther ever said this. It's one of those phrases that some Lutherans insist that, gee, it sounds like something Luther should have said. He should have said it if he didn't. Well, the apple tree aphorism, as I said, is not from an authoritative source, and it can't even be documented to Luther, but many Christians love it. And if you ask me for a teaching that expresses hope in the face of environmental crisis, enough hope to continue to work for good, continue to be graceful, continue to care, this little aphorism does that. But one more very important point. It's not just Christian hope. It's human hope. I met a scholar of Islam who taught me that there is a saying attributed to the prophet, peace be upon him, that if the day of judgment came and one was holding a fasila, which is a little palm tree, a date tree, one should plant the tree and then rise to meet the judgment. I was delighted to learn that there was an actual documented version of the aphorism. But there's more. I was at an Interfaith Environmental Fellowship held by Green Faith, Interfaith Partners of the Environment. The date tree and the apple tree aphorisms were up in discussion, and a Jewish scholar taught us that the saying came from rabbinic teaching in the early 2nd century. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai taught, quote, "If you have a sapling in your hand and someone says to you that the Messiah has come, stay and complete the planting and then go greet the Messiah." I imagine that little sapling probably was a fig tree. So we have figs, we have dates, we have apples. Sounds like a good mix to me. Let us not give up, even as difficult and painful as it may be to face the extent and the depth of the environmental distress, the troubles. Our religious traditions, based in apples and figs and dates and more, are not going to settle for trashing the earth. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Please,
Volkanig.
you can call me Gil.
Thank you, Gil. And in the midst of this environmental crisis, may we all still be compelled to plant our apple tree as a sign of hope. Next, we'll hear from Savem Kalyanju.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our hosts. And thank you, Gil, for taking one part that I wanted to share in a talk that's way too long and helping me have more time to talk about other things. I definitely was going to quote that hadith. I am going to attempt to share my screen with everybody so you can just read along with me. It's not pretty pictures, it's just the verses that I want to quote because I have more than one. During Ramadan, I was invited to Indonesia to go speak about Islam and the environment. And I was speaking to a primarily Muslim audience and sharing all of these sources where I, as a layperson, I am not an Islamic scholar, find the support for the beliefs that I developed from my own life experiences. As came up in a discussion a little bit earlier, I grew up in Alabama, not surrounded by a devout Muslim community, but surrounded by nature. And for me personally, that was my connection with God. The woods were my you can say my mosque, my masallam, a place where I would pray, the place where I felt closest to God. And so it's an honor today to be able to speak as a Muslim, not necessarily on behalf of all or as of the religion, but as a Muslim about how that inner belief is proven in Islamic scriptures. So I'm not much of a multitasker. I will be quiet now and make sure I'm sharing my screen, the correct one. Hopefully this is it. I'm already not on the first page, but that's okay. I can start here. So I am going to watch the time because I actually have several quotes that I want to give, but I will see how far I get. There are a few points that I want to emphasize, and then I will follow up with the quotes that bring up these points. Again, I don't consider myself to be a scholar. Even 5 years ago, I would get a little bit nervous before starting to share these interpretations, if you will, of Islamic scripture. But I'm happy to say now that not only has my self-confidence grown, but I'm hearing many, many Muslims across the globe saying the same things. And so, of course, Arabic, like all of the holy languages, is a very, very rich language. There's always room for interpretation when taking the Arabic and trying to put it into English. And those interpretations can change over time depending on the circumstances. And I want to bring up one of those terms in particular. Islam teaches very clearly that humankind, all of humankind, not just the Muslims, are the Khalifa of the earth. And again, if I may go back to my childhood very quickly, I remember asking my father when he taught me this, what in the world is a Khalifa? I don't know what a Khalifa is. He told me it was a vicegerent. I don't know what a vicegerent is either, but as a really smart kid, as I saw myself, I just nodded and said, okay, I get it. And I didn't get it at all. We can go into what the possible meanings of vicegerent are, but that was just one particular interpretation of the Arabic in one of the earlier versions of the Quranic translation, Yusuf Ali, as I believe. But other more appropriate terms might be representative or successor. But Khalifa also includes the meaning steward or caretaker. So right there at the very definition, very fundamental aspect of Islam, God teaches us that we are the Khalifa of the earth. Islam is teaching that humans are put here to be the stewards of the planet. Again, you might hear different interpretations, but this understanding is becoming much more common, and I feel very, very comfortable sharing it as one of the possible interpretations. But humans are placed by God on the earth to be the stewards or caretakers of the earth. And then the Quran also talks about the ayat, or the signs that are in both the heavens and the earth, both of which were created by God. And it's fascinating that it's always heavens and earth. Earth matters, and the signs in earth matter as well. So in that sense, this planet is a holy book of Islam, something that we should be learning from, and we should be treating as something holy. And other points that I will bring up if time allows, Islam talks a lot about balance, which of course is an important aspect of nature. And it talks about how waste and wastefulness are forbidden. And then there are the hadith, one of which was already quoted, the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that talk specifically about how humans should be treating plants and animals around us. So I'm already using up most of the time. So let me quote a couple of these verses. This is one of my favorite, and I read it a lot recently, and I've been reflecting on it, and I see even more meaning than I originally was aiming for pointing out. But in this verse from the Surah Al-Baqarah, or the cow, in the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate, when your Lord told the angels, I am putting here, Khalif is defined as successor, a successor on the earth, they said, how can you put someone there who will cause damage and bloodshed when we celebrate your praise and proclaim your holiness? But he said, I know things you know not. So I originally quoted this verse just to point out how God said we are the Khalifa. But then it also goes on to say that the angels knew that we would cause damage and bloodshed, but God knows more. And it just, I don't know what all this implies, but at one point it touched my heart to think that maybe God knows that after all the damage that we cause to this planet, we can still do something to right those wrongs and to fix it. Another verse that refers to the Khalifa here in this translation, it's translated as trustees of the earth. This verse, I won't read the whole thing. You can take a look as I talk about it, but it talks about all the things that God created, the heavens and the earth, the water that comes from the sky, the gardens, trees, all these parts of nature come from God. And the verse is talking about proof of God through nature, which is another important point made in Islam. Like the beauty of this earth is a sign of God's existence. God is the only one who created it. But it goes on, and I'll jump ahead. It talks about, and who made you the trustees? Again, this is the plural of Khalifa on earth. Is there any other God along with God? How little is it that you reflect? And by the way, these bold words are just my own, things that I wanted to point out. Here again, we are called the Khalifa of the earth, which I will define here as caretakers. And then we were told to reflect on all these things, all the things in nature that were created by God. So number one, we have that we are responsible for caring for the environment. And number two, that we are supposed to be paying attention to nature around us to learn from God. And so on that note, one verse at least about the signs of God in nature from Ali Imran. There are truly signs, here the word is ayat, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and in the alternation of night and day, for those with understanding who remember God standing, sitting, and lying down, who reflect on the creation of the heavens and the earth. Our Lord You have not created all this without purpose. You are far above that. So protect us from the torment of the fire. And this is one of my favorite verses because of the emphasis on reflection on not only the heavens, but also the earth. And at Green Muslims, we try to emphasize meditating, praying, making dhikr outside in nature so that you may become even closer to the Creator, while not only going into states of remembrance and prayer and contemplation, but also being surrounded by the beauty of the natural creation. And so reflecting on not only the heavens, but also on the earth is a way to become closer to God. So surely there is great value in that, and we must be caring for that book, that conglomeration of signs from God. We are responsible for taking care of it. I will skip ahead, but there are more verses that refer to these signs, and the signs are there for those who reflect. So taking time to spend time in nature and reflect on its beauty and why it was created and how it interacts and how it is necessary for our survival and how we impact it. In doing that, we all become closer to God. Next point that I wanted to bring up had to do with the importance of balance and how balance is a part of nature. And if we knock things off balance, then we cause harm to nature as a whole. I'm just about out of time, so I'll just leave it at that. But there are verses that talk about the importance of the balance and the balance in God's creation. And this one states that God raised and imposed the balance and that we are not supposed to transgress it. So when we take more from the environment than we need, we are knocking everything off balance and we are going against God's way, and we are harming the environment as a result. Avoiding waste is also another point which goes with balance. It is a sin in Islam to be wasteful, and yet waste seems to be a part of our daily lives that we cannot escape with the current culture of the entire planet, just about. And so it's something that we as a community of believers who care about the environment need to bring into perspective. Those are all verses from the Quran. There are also the hadith, the messages that were given directly by the prophet that tell us how to live. One of them was quoted already about how even at the end of time, if you're in the process of planting a tree or a sapling, you are supposed to finish it. But there are other verses as well talking about how we're supposed to treat life around us, including the animals. This one in particular, if someone kills so much as a sparrow or anything larger without a just cause, then God, the Exalted, will ask him about it on the day of resurrection. That little life matters. And this hadith goes on to say that a just cause has to be slaughtering for food, not hunting for sport or out of anger or frustration. And I think I've gone past my time, so I will stop there. But there are just so many examples in Islamic scripture about how we are responsible for taking care of the earth. Thank you.
Thank you so much. May we all be able to find a connection to God through nature and recognize our call to be stewards of the earth and restore the balance of nature. I have good news. Joelle Novi was able to fix the sound issue she was having.
Is it fixed?
We will continue with our respondents and then circle back to hear Ms. Novi. So right now, I would like to welcome Rajwant Singh.
Good evening, everyone. This is really an amazing opportunity for all of us to connect with each other, as well as come up with a plan by which we can all work together to really lead our own people, but together as one unit, as one family, to save the nature for our future generations. Now, I'm not a very tech-savvy person here. I'm trying to see if I can connect my screen. But anyway, I will start talking about what the Sikh teachings are about nature and creation. Guru Nanak, the founder of the Sikh faith, very clearly stated in our scripture, which is part of our daily prayer, And we, in our morning prayer as well as in the evening prayer, there's one particular stanza that we always repeat. And if I can get a permission from each one of you to sing this hymn in our tradition. Pavan Guru Pani Pita, Pavan Guru Pani Pita, Mata Tarit Mahat, Divas Raat Doe Dai Daya, Khele Sagal Jagat, Mata Tarit Mahat, Changiya Buraya Vache Taram Hadu, Mata Tarit Mahat. So the Guru Nanak, the founder of the Sikh faith, says in this very beautiful hymn, he says, look around. You have one family, you have parents, you have mother and father, and there's another entity that we all respect in our lives, the role of the teacher. Whether we go to school or whether we learn from all different teachers that teach us. So Guru Nanak said that pay attention to another family which God has created for you. And that family is, your mother is Mother Earth. And father is the water. Because if there was no water, there will be no life. And if there is no Mother Earth, we will not exist. And the teacher, the role of the teacher is to make us grow in our life and to experience our life in a more meaningful manner. And that role is played by the air. So this water, air, and earth, this is a family that Guru Nanak wanted us to be always reminded of. And just as we will not dishonor our own mother and father and teacher or family members, why would we destroy and dishonor this very family that God has created for us? So, and there is in this very same hymn, it also says, Changiyaiya Buriyaiya Vache Tarmadur, that your actions matter the most, not what you preach, not what you believe in. And your actions will determine whether you're closer to God, which is in this case, closer to nature, or you are away from it. And you will bring calamity by your own actions and by your attitude towards these very gifts of nature. So this was Guru Nanak, who made sure that this is repeated by his followers. And we Sikhs always repeat this. Any celebration we have, any service we have, whether it's a life or death or any prayer that we have, this hymn is always repeated and is part of our daily prayer. And then Guru Nanak also said that the creator is not separate, somewhere sitting away from the creation. The creator lives, just as an artist may not be inside the painting, but in this case, this artwork has the artist residing in it. So nature contains Vaheguru's, what we call as Vaheguru, the power which has created this creation, that God, out of his own love, expanded himself and took all these life forms. So whatever we see around us, it is all part of God's manifestation. So what we are taught is to have a sense of reverence towards nature, and we have to respect nature as part of our own being. And there's a very beautiful line. Guru Nanak says, "Balhari kudat vasya tera ant na jai lakhya," that I cannot imagine the immensity of the creativity of God's creation and God's presence around me. And what I'm struck by is the beauty by which God is revealing itself to me and to everyone. So there is another hymn by the fifth Guru, the fifth founder of the Sikh faith. He says, "Dekh phool phool phule, ahang tyag tyage," that you can observe nature and appreciate the beauty. And in the nature, you will find the deeper connection with God, because that's where God resides. And you are not separate from nature. You are not the master of nature. You are part of nature. So long as you consider yourself be the master or someone who is going to treat this as your own property, this will bring destruction in your life. And Guru says that the ego, the sense of ego that I am the master of my destiny, that I have to control things around me, this is where the whole problem lies. So ego is the root cause of any relationship we have, whether it's with other human beings, whether within our family, whether it's at the work situation, and whether it's with nature. And we are all watching what we are doing from last 200 years since the Industrial Revolution, or whenever this whole thing started. We have been fighting with nature. We are trying to control it, and we want to shape it according to our own comfort. And we want to treat this as our property. And we claim that God has given us this right. So Guru says that it is your ego. Once you eliminate your ego and see yourself as a part of nature, you will be able to really, at a deeper level, feel God's presence. If you really want to feel God's presence, go out and touch a tree. And Guru says, there's a very beautiful hymn that we all repeat at night, which is part of our nighttime prayer. He says, "Kaisi aarti hoye pavkhandna teri aarti, anhata shabd vajant peri." He says, you don't have to go to a physical place, whether we call it as Gurdwara or whatever religious site we can claim that the God lives there. He says, God does not live in a building. God lives in nature. And if you really want to worship God, then go out and see how nature is worshiping. He says, look how the air is dancing. All the trees are flowing. This is like the stars, and the moon is like those gems studded in a platter, offering the prayer to God. So this is our nighttime prayer. And I will conclude with a couple of things. With the one most beautiful hymn that Guru Nanak recited for us is, he says, "Taram ped shakha hari." That what is religion? We believe that our set of values or set of do's and don'ts define us, who we belong to, which religion or what parameters we define ourselves to. Guru says that the real religion is when you become like a tree. Taram ped. He says real religions, look at a tree. What is tree offering to anyone? Tree is offering shade. Tree is offering a fruit. Tree is offering comfort to anyone who comes near itself. So if you really want to practice the true religion, become like a tree. Taram ped shakha hari. When you become a tree like that, then your branches will be God himself. And the flowers which will produce out of this tree is Taram ped shakha hari, taram full phal gyan. The real religious wisdom will come as an outcome of this tree in the shape of a flower. And what you're going to produce is the true fruit, which is the virtuous life, which will be beneficial to everyone around you. And if you can provide a shade like a tree, where you provide comfort to everyone, that's when you can call your life to be most meaningful and successful. You can go from this world by being victorious, rather than being defeating yourself and bringing down the whole world. So this is in summary of what Sikhism teaches about how we need to have a sense of relationship with God, sense of relationship with nature. And based on these teachings, we decided we were going to celebrate the 550th birth anniversary of our founder, Guru Nanak's birthday. He was born in 1469. So in 2019, it was 50th birth anniversary. So we thought that rather than having a celebration and having a party and singing and repeating his words, what can we do practically which can reflect that what Guru Nanak preached, the founder of our faith, that we can show to the world that this is what we should be doing by following his teachings, not just preach and talk about it. So we decided that we were going to plant 1 million trees worldwide, and in the name of Guru Nanak. And we started a movement of planting a forest, a mini forest, an urban forest of 550 trees. And we launched that in March of 2019. And I'm happy to report to everyone that we have planted 600 forests. Each forest has 550 trees, and these are all native species. And they bring immense amount of biodiversity. Each forest, within 6 months, you can hear the birds, you can hear the bees, you can have bees have their own nest. It's just an amazing journey, and I wish I could play a video for you all. But within a year, you can have a full-fledged forest in your backyard, in your neighborhood, and you only need a 200 square meter land, which is a 6 parking space. So you can have your own forest, and you don't need a government to come and save the planet. We can do it all ourselves. And it costs only, if you want to plant a forest in India or somewhere else, it costs about $1,300. We do it here about $10,000. You can have your own forest on your own birthday or your child's birthday. Thank you so much. This is my reflection on what Sikhs believe in. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's so much in what you said, but what spoke to me was family is experienced through human biological connections as well as experience through our connection with nature, and that nature is our family too and must be reverenced. Next, we'll hear from our last respondent, Christian Barker.
Well, hello, everyone. Like so many have said here, I too am so grateful and honored to be here and share this space with you. I'm really moved by what I've heard so far. And I just have a few remarks to make about what a Buddhist perspective might uniquely add to these kinds of interfaith conversations. Unlike in this forum, in the wider culture, the response to climate and related socio-ecological crises is, and that long list that Fred shared of the challenges that we face in declining health, the earth, it takes the form of policy and technical solutions. These are indeed huge, necessary, skillful, most worthy of our advocacy. And from a Buddhist perspective, eco-social crises are at root a problem of the human heart-mind, confusion in what we call the citta, a misunderstanding of the true sources of happiness and authentic well-being, mistaken perception, not only about the world, but about the nature of our own mind and the tendencies of that mind. And even more, perhaps a resistance to understanding the true nature of mind. So to borrow from James Baldwin, they do not know and they do not want to know. So all the policy and technical solutions in the world will not counter the untrained mind's ravenous pursuits now on such a scale that they lead to self-destruction. So at One Earth Sangha, we suggest that the unique contribution of Buddhist traditions is so powerful. They have an enormous role to play in responding to these crises through the insights into the nature of those tendencies and the practices of cultivations that counter them. Incessant craving for that which is pleasurable, intolerance for the uncomfortable, disregard and willingness to harm other beings, resistance to the truth. These are the causes of suffering, suffering for self, other, and world. Buddhism implores us to see clearly the tendencies of mind so that we may interrupt these habits and find durable, true, deeply and shared well-being. In his recent book, Secular, After Sustainability, John Foster names widespread, implicative denial about the climate crisis. Implicative denial is acceptance of fact with resistance to implications. I know, and I don't act as if I know. Even among the climate converted, we might say, I know, and I willingly forget. In my thoughts and words, I know the conceptual truth. In my actions, I habitually discount it. I deny that which is more abstract, the future, the far away. I choose to ignore the not quite yet here. In my actions, this implicative denial, he identifies this form of denial as foundational to our woefully insufficient response to what is underway. So how do we counter this pervasive and debilitating implicative denial? Tibetan Buddhist teacher Trogam Rinpoche says at one point, through seeing the nature of mind again and again, meditation practice supports us in being haunted by the truth. It becomes impossible to forget. Increasingly, I cannot unsee what I know to be true. This returning to the truth again and again in a deep way that integrates fully, embodied, includes the whole perceptive apparatus, heart, mind, body, returning to what is true and being supported in that encounter, which can be overwhelming. We know ourselves. These truths can be overwhelming. Supported by practice, supported by the wider sense of meaning and belonging, I can be skillfully haunted. Remembering what is true and what is important. And from that clear seeing, skillful actions quite naturally follow, explicitly cutting through the forces of implicative denial. So through my work at Wonder Sangha, I have come to see that our community is rife with practitioners who are quietly yet actively engaged on ecological crises in various ways, not leading so much with their Buddhist identities, but deeply supported by their practice. In our tradition, we are trained in seeing interdependence, what Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh beautifully calls interbeing, our radical embeddedness with nature. The sacredness in every place, and to borrow from another speaker, in every neighbor, human and more than human. The necessity of compassion as well as accountability. We come to see that the separation from the rest of nature, that perception is not inherent. It is trained into us by a culture which values domination and accumulation. Yet the world abounds with connection, with interbeing, with integration, with generosity. Interdependence pervades this very breath, the one you are breathing right now, is testament to your relationship with trees. As an example of that, I want to share a practice from a Buddhist community, not here in the US, but in Thailand, that embodies these ideas quite explicitly, and at every level, I find this work so inspiring. So in our traditions, like many other faiths mentioned here, forests and trees play a particular role. They hold this very special place in our traditions. Most famously, the Buddha awakened under the Bodhi tree with the protection of that being. The earth herself supported the Buddha in his awakening. The Buddha said that a tree is a wonderful living being, giving shelter, food, warmth, protection to all living things. A tree even gives shade to those who would wield the axe to cut it down. Yet in so many Buddhist countries, including Thailand, deforestation is rampant. So I want to share with you, oops, can I have screen sharing? Host has disabled participant screen sharing. There we go. Thank you so much. I'm empowered. So I give you the ordination of trees. Can you still see it? Is it obscured? No. Okay, good. So this is a Samrang pagoda led by Venerable Bun Salath, a Theravadan monastic community in Thailand. And this is also happening in Cambodia, Vietnam, Burma. This regular ordination of trees, wrapping them in the monk's robes, increasingly at risk of their own safety, because as simple as an act as this it provides protection. Recognized by the wider culture, these beings may not be harmed, and so the forest. So that which is systemically ignored, objectified, commodified by the forces of extractive capitalism is instead, through this recognition, through this perception, confirmed as sacred, thus given powerful protection. This is ingenious and yet a completely fair application of a deeply meaningful faith ritual. Where is the opening for implicative denial here? There is none, I suggest. In this one act, this beautiful ritual, the tree being, the future, the forest, even the mind of the monastic are all recognized, valued, and protected. What hidden power lies in the practices and rituals of your tradition? I'll just close with a few lines from our dedication of merit we share at the end of every one of the gatherings, like this that we hold at One Earth Sangha. May all beings be cherished. May all places be held sacred. May all injustices of oppression and devaluation be fully righted, remedied, and healed. May all wounds to forest, rivers, deserts, and oceans, all wounds to sacred earth be lovingly restored to bountiful health. May all beings everywhere delight in whale song, bird song, and blue sky. May all beings abide in peace and well-being, and awaken to their true nature. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, and thank you for offering the idea that the solution is recognizing the transformative power of meditation. And then meditation haunts us with the truth, changes our heart and mind, and then compels us to make actual change in our reality. And the ordination of trees with which you left us is a very powerful image. A special thanks is extended to all of our panelists for sharing your wisdom and knowledge and your sacred scripture as we seek to build a world where we intentionally care for creation and live sustainable lives. At this time, we'll swing back around to one of our keynote speakers, Joelle Novi, and we'll hear from her for about 5 minutes.
Can I be heard now?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's so great. Well, I'm so sorry for the snafu earlier, but this is a really powerful time to talk as well, when I've heard so many of my favorite teachers. I think what I'm struck by, again, is that as all of us face the reality of our climate crisis, when we think about the fact that burning fossil fuels is pouring heat trapping climate pollution into our atmosphere, causing our earth to warm, that's going to harm everything we love now and in the future, that we are the first generation to be experiencing the climate crisis and the last generation that's going to be able to do anything about it. Every single one of our traditions, when we think about our values, when we think about our teachings, every single one of our traditions call us to be aware of our interdependence. Every single one of our traditions call us to take responsibility for the protection of the sacred in each other and in the natural world. And to think about the future and a transmission of what's important from now to the future. So we cannot, it's not just that we need to do something about this, it's that we cannot be faithful to our own traditions. We cannot be who we are if we do not respond faithfully and rise to this moment. And each of our teachers tonight have so powerfully reminded us of that. If Rabbi Fred wants to pull up the slide, we can, or if, so I just want to make a warm invitation to anyone who's feeling moved tonight to do something to respond to the environmental crisis from within your faith community, or to do more, or to take a next step. That Interfaith Power and Light DMV is a place where folks who are having conversations like this one, who are moved to take action, moved to respond faithfully to the climate crisis, are coming together. And we may be able not only to connect you to other folks in general, but we increasingly have green groups inside of faith traditions, green groups inside of specific denominations, green groups for folks living in particular counties and regions. So there's lots of smaller, intimate communities forming inside this work as our movement matures. Rabbi Fred, if you want to go 2 slides in. So one more. So this is one of my favorite pictures, and I want to offer it as a way of thinking about what taking action on climate change in a faithful way looks like. And it echoes many of the examples we heard from the other teachers tonight. So these are 3 folks that this is a picture I love from the People's Climate March in 2016. These are 3 people from the Green Muslims with their signs. And I don't know if they are legible on your screen, but one of them on the bottom center is a quote from the Quran about walking gently on the earth. And to me, this exemplifies the first part of responding to climate change faithfully, which is about grounding ourselves in our traditions and opening authentic conversations with each other about why climate change matters to us. I want to invite everyone on this Zoom to think about the community for which you are the best person in the world to open a conversation about climate change. There is some community for which you are the most powerful person in the world to start this conversation. And that conversation doesn't have to be about science. It can be about how you feel about this. You can say, you know, a good opening question is, why does climate change matter to you? So that's learn. And then the second sign, top left, is a poster that says, "Dear Allah, please forgive us for all of our sins." And they list things like waste and overfishing and pollution and destruction. And this sign to me speaks to the whole world of going green, greening the way. And we saw so many beautiful examples of greening our homes and greening our sanctuaries from the previous speakers. I'll just mention one that's on my mind right now, which is that there are open home solar purchasing groups throughout our region right now. DC, Maryland, and Northern Virginia. Solar United Neighbors is bringing together homeowners to go solar together. And we would love to connect you and your congregation to that opportunity to go solar in good company with neighbors. I'll also say with greening, we increasingly have opportunities for communities in congregations to look at the harms of gas burning and actually measure it themselves. So this is not about going green, but more about taking stock. But we have methane detectors for taking a walk with your youth group, and Rajwan's community did this, the Gurdwara, that go around with a methane detector and find gas leaks in your neighborhood. And we're also testing kitchens, gas burning kitchens, to see if the nitrogen oxide levels are safe, or usually not safe when folks are cooking on gas burning stoves. And we can do those tests in sanctuary, in congregational kitchens as well as homes. So those are both ways that folks are directly engaging, both with the clean energy and with measuring the impacts of dirty energy. And finally, I want to look at that last sign. So this is from 2016 in the Trump administration. And it's a little bit cheeky. They say, common sense ballot, should we ban Muslims or should we ban all these environmental pollution and all this bad stuff? So I just want to emphasize how critical I've come to believe it is that we respond to the climate crisis, not just by planting trees and not just by changing light bulbs, but by joining together to change laws. Corporate polluters are the reason that we are in this crisis, and we will have to become, a movement big enough to respond collectively. And groups like Interfaith Power and Light are supporting folks in speaking out and raising their voices for stronger climate policy at the county, state, and national level. The thing that's most on my mind right now is that our neighbors in Appalachia have been fighting a pipeline, a very destructive and unnecessary pipeline called the Mountain Valley Pipeline for 9 years. And just now, through a bunch of secret maneuvers, the draft debt ceiling agreement explicitly permits this pipeline and prevents the communities impacted by it from going to court if it breaks environmental laws or causes harm. So it is not too late to speak out to our legislators and ask, the Virginia Senator Tim Kaine and the entire Virginia congressional delegation are going to introduce amendments trying to take this piece out and say, these people are not, and we have a distinctive faith voice on this issue, not that that these folks who live in these communities whose home places will be destroyed by this pipeline, they are not bargaining chips. They are not, to be thrown under the bus to get some other larger deal done or some other climate goal achieved. They are our neighbors, and we have a big banner that says our neighbors are not negotiable. I will leave it there, and I'll put some links to some of the things I mentioned in the chat, with much gratitude to everyone who's participating in this conversation. It's so important, and I would love to work with all of you.
Thank you so much for reminding us that we have to respond to the environmental crisis so that we can remain true to our individual religious traditions. And may we all embrace our power to make positive change through our legislative bodies. And hearing from you was worth the wait. We will now move into our small groups where we will examine the implications of the environmental crisis further. So we have 5 groups. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through them, but I just want to let you know that once you're in your breakout session, your host will review some ground rules about civil conversation, and you will move into dialogue about your specific topic in relation to the environment. So I believe that we are now ready to move into our breakout groups.